Tonight on KQED Newsroom, how to handle the Omicron wave of COVID infections and when it'll be over. The latest from Stanford epidemiologist Dr. Yvonne Maldonado. And our special guest tonight is the man who made headlines when he was elected mayor of Stockton. Michael Tubbs talks about his new memoir and what he's doing now to tackle poverty in California. Plus, how Bay Area lawmakers marked the anniversary of the January 6th riots, and a look ahead at the political stories brewing in the new year. Coming to you from KQED headquarters in San Francisco, this Friday, January 7th, 2022. Hello and welcome back to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clements. So here we are at the start of a new year and still talking about the same thing. The coronavirus and the Omicron variant, to be specific, of course, which, as you undoubtedly know by now, is far more contagious than the previous Delta variant. Hospitals are running into staffing shortages due to sick employees. Intensive care units are filling up. Indoor mask mandates are being extended. And cloth masks are not enough anymore. You need to add a surgical mask, or you could go with one of these KN95 or N95 masks. Most drugstores are sold out of at-home rapid tests, and professional PCR testing lines are long. So how bad will this storm get, and when will it be over? We invited Dr. Yvonne Maldonado, a professor of pediatrics and an infectious disease epidemiologist at Stanford University, to share her thoughts with us tonight. She joins us by Skype. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Maldonado.
Thank you so much.
So despite the rise in cases, California's leaders seem determined to keep schools and businesses open. Indoor dining is still permitted. Is this the right course of action, or should we be shutting things down?
Well, at this point, what we have going for us in California is very high vaccination rates and people that are still masking in social settings and distancing properly. If you go outside the state, you'll see that California is really doing a good job. I am really confident that if we can stick to that, that we can keep schools and businesses open.
Omicron is so contagious and it's spreading so fast, it almost feels inevitable that most people will catch it. Is that accurate?
Well, I don't think everybody's going to catch it. I think for the vaccinated individual, especially if somebody's eligible for boosting and is boosted, the risk is going to be much lower. I think we need to avoid getting infected at this point as much as possible, because some people will say, if it's inevitable, let me just get it over with. But remember, We're seeing hospitals that are packed. Our children's hospitals and our adults' hospitals here at Stanford are really at high levels, not just with COVID, but with other infections and other problems. And so we really can't afford to have people getting sick and being hospitalized and dying from this disease. And because we can't predict who is going to be that person who's going to have progression, we all need to be as careful as possible.
The reports seem to indicate that this particular surge may peak at the end of January or the beginning of next month. What do you think about that timeline?
Well, I've kind of given up on my crystal ball, but as an epidemiologist, I do like numbers. And all of the models that I've seen have really suggested that this, because it's so transmissible, it will rip through the population very quickly, but also will drop off very quickly. And we've seen that happen in other places, in particular in South Africa. So I do think that February is a good time frame to think about. We should be done with this horrible surge. I'm hoping by early February.
I really appreciate what you're saying about it being so hard to look into that crystal ball, because I feel like we've been here before where we felt like the surge is going to end for the Delta variant and then things are going to kind of go back to normal. And at some point this is going to become endemic and it won't be such a problem in our society. But I have to ask you one more time, do you see it becoming endemic? Do you see it becoming like the flu, something that we get an annual shot for? And when do you think that might occur?
Well, let's just remember that the 1918 influenza didn't spend itself out for 3 years, and they didn't have vaccines, and everyone was getting infected and unfortunately dying. But even with that, it took 3 long years. So we're heading into our 3rd year here, and we are fortunate to have vaccines that does lessen the severity of the outcomes for people. But this Omicron variant is just incredible. It's so infectious that we're just going to see something new that we didn't expect. But on the other hand, we did predict that if people didn't all get vaccinated, and it's not just the US, it's around the world, that we would be susceptible to new variants. So this isn't it's not what we expected, but we knew it could be possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Dr. Yvonne Maldonado with Stanford.
Thank you so much.
At 26, Michael Tubbs became the youngest mayor of Stockton and the youngest of any major American city. Tubbs championed education, worked to reduce violence, and launched a guaranteed income program. Despite national praise for his efforts, he lost his bid for re-election as mayor in 2020. He's now working as a special advisor to Governor Gavin Newsom on the topic of poverty, which he experienced as a child. Here's a clip from a trailer for an HBO documentary about Tubbs.
I remember being hungry, having to hold my mom while she cried, hearing gunshots that night. I remember how hard it was to grow up. I think that quote, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world," is super important because oftentimes people get scared to try to make change because it's like, well, what if it doesn't work? The bigger question is, what happens if you don't do anything?
Tubbs has written a book about his life and work so far titled The Deeper the Roots, and he joins us now by Skype. Michael, thank you so much for being with us, but I am so disappointed that you're not here in studio. We were hoping to make that happen, but with the Omicron variant raging, we decided it would be safer to do it like this. So you're in your hotel room here in San Francisco.
Yeah, I'm in a WeWork in San Francisco, which is why my lighting doesn't look as great as yours, but thank you so much for having me. We just have to do it again.
And you're going to have to bring your amazing wife next time with you as well. I'm looking forward to meeting her too and sharing about her work with our audience. But let's get back to you. In one of the two documentaries about you, you're speaking at a graduation ceremony and you say, they tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were a seed. Could you tell us about your background, about that seed in the ground that was Michael Tubbs and the soil that you grew up in?
Absolutely. And that quote just means so much the older I get, but particularly in my childhood. I mean, I was born in Stockton, California. I was born in poverty. I was born with a father incarcerated. I was born to a mother who had me as a teenager. I was born in a neighborhood with underfunded, low-performing schools. So all those things that usually bury people and lead to negative outcomes and lead to the things people complain about on Nextdoor or on Facebook were things I personally experienced. And I realized through not just writing the book, but being a mayor, a city council person, and a teacher, that those things were meant to bury me and people like me, but they planted us to be able to grow and to bloom and to really tell the truth about who we are as a country and how much further we have to go to make the American dream and promise real for everybody.
In your book, you talk about the influence of the three women who raised you as your father was incarcerated. Tell us about them.
I was so lucky and blessed to be raised by my mom, my aunts, and grandmother, who were extraordinary people, but extraordinary in their ordinariness. My mother, she just has a high school degree, and my grandma and aunt just have an associate degree. And they worked incredibly hard and really provided a foundation of love, a sense of self-determination and worth, structure, and a real demand for excellence. And also just an understanding that no matter what, I may not have had everything, but I had three ferocious women who were always ready to fight for me, whether it's at the basketball courts or or at school. And I think they really instilled in me the values of service, of empathy, of kindness, of spirituality, of determination that have sort of served me well thus far.
In your book, you discuss how you eventually went to Stanford University. You earned 2 degrees in your 4 years, met your wife, and then you moved back to Stockton to run for office. I want to watch another short clip now from the trailer of the documentary True Son that was from that time in your life.
Reinvent Stockton! I think when you look at Michael's team and you see like people who grew up in Stockton or from Stockton or been educated in Stockton, it's true. In many respects, like we're trying to take back our city.
For most people who are not involved in politics, now is the time when they get involved.
I know we're all really really excited about electing this man to be the next District 6 State Councilman.
Change that's not going to happen because one person is elected, but it's going to happen because one person elected is a catalyst to bring a whole lot of people to become engaged in that process of creating change.
So then you became a city council member and then won office as mayor. And during that time as mayor, you launched a guaranteed income program in which about 100 people received $500 a month, no strings attached. Tell us about the outcome of that program.
Well, the outcome, well, first let me say, it feels so weird looking at that clip. Like, I know I'm young now, but I was even younger then. I was just out of college, had no idea what the next decade would bring. So thank you for that.
You kind of see yourself through other people's eyes, right? Because at the time, you just knew what you could do and you wanted to push it forward. But now you see how others viewed you.
It's funny, like I'm at this campaign rally and I'm like hugging my aunt and laying on her shoulder like a 5-year-old, right? And I think that shows how important my three mothers are to me. But to answer your question, in Stockton, we were the first city in contemporary times to pilot guaranteed income. And what we saw was that, people didn't stop working. In fact, the cash allowed people to work more. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely than those who didn't to go from part-time to full-time work, and 2 times less likely to be unemployed. And we also saw the health impact. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income had their stress and anxiety and cortisol levels lowered to normal levels compared to those who didn't. And since that, I started an organization called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. We have about 63 mayors who have signed up to be a part, including my dear friend, Mayor London Breed of San Francisco. We have guaranteed income pilots happening throughout this country, and many of whom are seeing similar results to what we saw in Stockton 4 years ago, before there was a pandemic, before there was people running for president on this idea of guaranteed income. So I'm very proud of that work and looking forward to how it continues.
We asked our viewers if they had any questions for you, and one of them shared on Twitter this question, asking why your experiment, your UBI experiment, Universal Basic Income, didn't take into consideration how the individuals spent their money prior to the experiment, and why did you base success on the statements by the participants of how the money was spent without verification?
Yeah, well, the premise of the second question is actually false. So if you go to stocktondemonstration.org, you can read our whole research paper that wasn't designed by me, because I'm not a researcher, but by like PhD researchers at University of Pennsylvania. And what they did qualitative and quantitative data. So they tracked spending because we gave the money on debit cards. We were able to see how money was actually spent. The base of research and sort of how consumer behavior works suggests that folks didn't make new spending decisions because they had more money, but folks were able to continue to spend money the way they were able to spend it. And then if anything was new, it was to meet unmet needs that the previous amount of money wasn't able to capture.
So your book mainly discusses events up to and through your time as mayor, and there's a short discussion at the end about your re-election loss. You lost to a Republican by 13 points in a somewhat Democratic city. What happened?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and probably a discussion for a second book. But from the variety of reports and op-eds and things that have been written, I think it's a mixture of a couple of things. Number one, disinformation. I mean, we had a 4-year disinformation campaign that preyed on sort of the fact that Stockton is the largest city in this country without a public university. It has the lowest rate of college graduates per capita for adults in this nation. So in environments like that, sort of disinformation flourishes. When there's one newspaper that's been decimated, people turn their Facebook to news. And if every day you turn on Facebook and you have this first mayor, this young mayor, this black mayor, and all you see on Facebook is that he's stealing money, if you're predisposed to think that black people steal money, then it becomes true because you've heard it from more than one person, or that he's under investigation, or that he's never at work. But I think if you look at the body of work and the way at which not just the state, but this nation in many respects is emulating the sort of work we did, I think we still say it's a job well done. So to answer your question succinctly, I think progress comes at a price. I spent 4 years being an unapologetic fighter for working families. I spent 4 years being very explicitly anti-white supremacist. I spent 4 years sort of delivering for everyone in the city, and particularly the most vulnerable. And that made a lot of people uncomfortable because despite the numbers, if you look at the past 6 mayors Stockton has had, 4 of them have been Republicans. There was just a report in NBC about how one of the leaders of the anti-vaccination movement in this nation, and an insurrectionist called Stockton home. So I think the miracle is that someone like me was ever the mayor, and someone like me was ever the city council member in a community like that. So super proud of it. The loss was disappointing, but sort of what's happened next has also been something I've really enjoyed.
And we are looking forward to hearing about that new project called EPIC, End Poverty in California. But unfortunately, that's going to have to be an interview for another day. Michael Tubbs, former mayor of Stockton, now working with the governor's office to end poverty. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year, everybody.
We start the new year with a fair bit of turnover in California's political world. State Assembly member Lorena Gonzalez announced she's retiring to take a bigger role in labor organizing, while Central Valley Congress member Devin Nunes has resigned to become CEO of former President Trump's Media and Technology Group. And California lawmakers reflected on the one-year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C.
So think of all of the struggles that all of you have been through, from your communities, from your history, from your family, and how you made it. And it's our duty to bring others along and to make sure this democracy prevails so that they can have those opportunities and more, and don't have to go through what we went through. And so January 6th, yeah, it should be a reminder of all of this in terms of the history of this country.
Joining us now are KQED politics and government correspondent Marisa Lagos and KCBS radio political reporter Doug Sovereign. They join us both by Skype. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Priya.
Hi.
So Doug, glad to have you on for the first time with us. Let's start with how COVID is affecting the state. Top of mind for everyone. You tweeted out, Doug, some of the latest statistics from the state of California, including a 21% rate of positive tests compared to just 2% back at the beginning of December. So far, no moves to shut California down again. Even the Super Bowl looks like it's moving forward. What are you hearing from the leadership?
Yeah, they're not even considering shutting down the state. I mean, the governor and his health officials know that there was a lot of political pushback from that when they did it last time. And they're not even, I mean, they say it's not even on the table or even being discussed to close schools, to close businesses, to go back to lockdown. Whether they're not even really bringing it up, that's up, to each of us to decide how truthful they're being with that. But no. They look at the economics, they look at the science, and things are very different this time from, say, a year ago when we had a really bad winter surge because, of course, now most people are vaccinated. The new Omicron variant is not as severe. So they look at the risk-reward balance and decide, no, we want to keep kids in school. We want to keep businesses open. So they say there is no shutdown coming, even though the mask mandate has been extended now for another month into mid-February.
Yeah, looking at the science, the data, probably also the politics of this, the economy and the angles there, and also all the news that came out about how hard it has been for kids and the mental health crisis that kids are going through because of those shutdowns. Marisa, I want to turn to you because it just got personal for you. You just recovered from COVID. Tell us about how that was and what you learned about the system.
Yeah, unfortunately, over the winter break, myself and several family members did come down with what felt like, a flu. I was in bed for 2 days. It wasn't fun, but it wasn't debilitating. We are all testing negative now. I mean, a few things struck me. One is just how challenging it is to be responsible and uphold some of those isolation guidelines when you have young kids, especially in the house, or just live in the situation many of us do in California. We're not, we don't have wings of a home that you can sort of wall off if someone tests positive. And then I think to Doug's point, that positivity rate is eyebrow raising, but it's probably an undercount because we know that so many people like my family tested at home. But I do think that also to what he said, this is a different scenario than where we were, especially March of 2020. And I do think one thing we heard that was interesting from the head of Health and Human Services this week, Dr. Galley, is that while we, a lot of the numbers that we report are based on, say, people in the hospital with COVID, a lot of those people are not in the hospital necessarily because of COVID. And so I think we're really trying to, gauge in the public health world and in the media world, like, how do we sort of accurately represent what's happening now since it's such a fast-moving situation?
All right, well, let's turn to politics and political leadership here in the Golden State. I want to talk about Larry Elder, who was the Republican who got the most votes against Gavin Newsom in the recall last year, but still, didn't come anywhere close. He announced this week that he is not going to be running for governor against Newsom in the fall. What did he say about his reasoning for this? Doug, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a huge surprise, but he was the biggest name who we thought might challenge Gavin Newsom again for re-election this year. And, Larry Elder got 3.5 million votes, by far the most of any of the potential replacement candidates. But remember, the recall lost 62 to 38%. I mean, he got trounced badly. And officially what he said was he's starting a political action committee. He's going to raise money to help Republicans win House and Senate races, to affect local elections around the country. And I think he probably looked at this and thought, okay, I got what I can get out of running. The odds are he was not going to win this time either. I mean, I suppose he could catch lightning in a bottle and some miracle could happen and he could win, but it's extremely unlikely. So he probably hit his ceiling. So why not instead use his energy to raise money and increase his clout and prestige nationally and not come out as a two-time loser? So he bowed out of this race. He's going to pursue that instead. And that leaves this field open. And again, Kevin Faulconer, former San Diego mayor, may decide to get back in and run again. But if he doesn't, you have to wonder, who do the Republicans have that they're going to put up statewide against Gavin Newsom, or for that matter, against U.S. Senator Alex Padilla?
Yeah, and I'd argue that you will definitely be hearing from Kevin Kiley as well, the assembly member from up there near Sacramento in this coming year. Marisa, let's turn to Lorena Gonzalez in the assembly. She's moving from the legislature into activism.
Right. So she was a longtime labor leader who is returning to her roots. She's going to be taking over the helm of the California Labor Federation. That's the second largest sort of umbrella organization after the national AFL-CIO. So a big job for her, certainly a big sort of loss for some Democrats and especially labor-friendly Democrats in Sacramento, because she has chaired the powerful Appropriations Committee. I think some people saw her as more powerful than the actual Assembly Speaker. And I think that this speaks to, what we're seeing in a lot of areas. There's just a lot of shuffling happening, both the Great Resignation more broadly, but also because of the new political boundaries. I think a lot of changes there. Kevin Kiley, you mentioned, I think he's actually going to run for Congress. So we will be hearing from him. But there's a lot of people who are kind of eyeing those new congressional districts and looking for their next move.
And I'm also going to put a plug in for everyone to listen to Marisa's Political Breakdown interview this week, which was with Lorena Gonzalez. But moving on, Doug, you spoke with some local lawmakers, congressional lawmakers, who reflected on January 6th. In particular, you talked with Ro Khanna, I believe. Can you tell us about what he had to say and how people here locally, our local representatives, are considering what happened a year ago and where we should be moving forward to?
Yeah, we had a few local members of Congress on, and I spoke with Ro Khanna on my show. I won't put a plug in for it here, but it's interesting to me because Ro Khanna, a real stalwart progressive, one of the leaders of the progressive wing of the Democrats in the House, took a sort of muted view compared to some of the others who, a lot of people are warning about looming civil war and things are just going to get worse. And he sort of backed off that and said, let's not get carried away. He's comfortable with the improvements in security and with the Capitol Police. He doesn't think we're going to see a repeat of what we've seen. He doesn't think it's going to get worse. But he also warned that we do need to come together. And this deepening polarization in the country is really unhealthy, and our democracy is fragile. And we saw that more in the last year than we'd ever seen before. But he doesn't think we're going back to, somebody being cudgeled on the floor of the House in the 1870s or something like that.
Okay.
So he hopes that we are moving in the right direction.
We only have a minute left, unfortunately. This always goes too fast, but I do want to talk about the big legislative action that you're going to see coming out this year from the state legislature. We've already seen a push towards universal health care in California, another run at that. Marisa.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be one of the big fights of the year, but I think we have a lot ahead. I mean, the governor is going to unveil his budget proposal for the year on Monday. Talking to folks in the finance space and state government, they expect by May that what will already be rosy projections on Monday will get even rosier. So I think what we're going to see is a real debate over how to spend that money. Obviously, single payer and universal health care is a whole separate debate. But then also, schools. We started with COVID. I think that that's an area where there's going to be a lot of conversations around how we finance schools, whether those sort of long-standing ways that we distribute money needs to be changed.
All right, we have to leave it there. Marisa Lagos with KQED, Doug Sovereign with KCBS. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
This week's Something Beautiful features abstract aerial views of salt ponds, shot by Bay Area photographer Barbara Boisevan. By blending urban and natural landscapes, Boisevan highlights an unusual organic beauty in the heart of Silicon Valley. To learn more about Barbara's work, visit barbaraboisevan.com. And if you want to share your feedback with us, you can email us at knr@kqed.org, which is exactly what many of you did in response to our special episode, California's Plastic Problem. Juanita wrote, "I encourage more programs like this, ones that motivate in a positive vein and give your viewers hope for the future and belief that we can all contribute to reducing waste." Patricia and Jerry wrote, "It should be shown to every classroom and home in the Bay Area." And Susan wrote, "I always enjoy this show and want to thank you again for your great reporting." Thanks for letting us know how you felt about the documentary. For those of you who haven't seen it yet but would like to, visit us at kqed.org/newsroom. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can reach me on Twitter at Priya D. Clemens. That's the end of our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We will see you right back here next Friday night. Have a great weekend.